how much time he gains, who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only at what he does himself to make it just and holy. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations.
Are you ready to make the most of the only life you have? To make smart money choices focused on achieving what you care about most? Here to help you balance living well today without sacrificing your tomorrow is the Retirement Answer Man, Roger Whitney.
Comparison is inevitable, you know? It's natural to compare where we're at in our journey to others that we see around us. Now, a couple of weeks ago, when we worked with Kim to create a net worth statement, part of their resources to reach their ideal retirement, no doubt you compared your net worth to theirs. Engaged, okay, how am I doing relative to Kim and Joe? And maybe you felt really confident. Hey, I'm doing pretty good compared to Kim and Joe. Or maybe I'm about the same and that's okay. Or maybe you felt like, holy crap, I'm really far behind. My life is ruined. I'm never going to get to where they're at. Those feelings are natural. But those feelings taken beyond the natural subconscious comparison that we all do are going to zap all the energy you have to walk your own unique journey into retirement. And this is really important. Now, I look at net worth all day long because I walk life with clients, and I use the net worth statement as that dashboard to help them allocate assets to work towards things they care about. So I think that's a really important document, and that's why it's such a great tool. But the danger of a net worth statement is if you look at it only relative to others. I can tell you from my 25 years of experience working with clients that there is very little connection between happiness, fulfillment, purpose in life, between relative to what their net worth is. I've worked with ultra wealthy individuals and I've worked with very normal individuals. There's no connection to happiness. Sometimes it can be inverse. That's one reason why I wrote the blog post to remind us that we need to set what our core values are. Because if we have those set and we walk in congruence with those, we're going to probably have a much more fulfilling life than if we just focus on our net worth statement. So on today's show, what we're going to do is we are going to answer some net worth statement questions that we've gotten over the last few weeks as we've talked about it with Kim and Joe. And then we're going to talk about how to use this in a positive way to help you along on your journey. But we can't do that until this very important disclaimer. That's right. It's time for that all-important disclaimer. So let's just get it on the table here. I'm not giving you financial advice. I don't know anything about you. You don't know anything about me. I would be a fool to give you advice. But what I will give you is helpful hints and education based on my journey of working directly with clients. So you got to think of it in that vein. Before you make any decisions, talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor, because that's just common sense. Now, let's get to the hot topic of the week. So in the news today, Kim and Joe are going to find out tonight, Wednesday, March 1st, whether they can achieve their ideal retirement. How cool is that? Tonight is the live webinar for Kim and Joe to find out whether they can retire or not. So I hope you've registered. If you haven't, go check your 6-Shot Saturday email for the registration link. So here's what we're going to do tonight, assuming you're listening to it the day of the release of this podcast. We are going to review their goals and their resources. That will include their net worth statement. So we're going to walk through it together live. And then we're going to look at the results of my analysis of whether it looks possible that they can achieve this ideal retirement. And we'll dig down in some layers of that analysis so you get an idea of how I came to that decision within the time that we have. If they are not able to reach their ideal retirement, we're going to negotiate a solution, Kim and I, right there, and you'll be able to listen in and we'll test some of those scenarios. And when we get that workable solution, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to stress test it against common retirement risks. So this process that we're going to outline is a process that I've worked on for 25 years, and I call it Agile Retirement Management. It's a way of being very agile as we deal with all the different things coming on. So I look forward tonight. It's going to be a blast. Replays will be available only to those that are signed up for Six Shot Saturday. So if you haven't signed up, go to rogerwhitney.com and enter your first name and email so you can be assured to get access to the replay of the Kim and Joe Retirement Plan Live webinar. Very cool. Now let's get on to your net worth questions. So in this week's Practical Planning segment, let's talk to some listeners who have questions on net worth statements. And I want to start off with Kenny. So Kenny emailed in. First off, he thanked me for the podcast. He said it was great stuff. And I'll tell you, it always makes me happy to hear that. But here's his comment and question. My wife and I need someone like you to get us on track for retirement. However, I'm discouraged somewhat when I see that Kim and Joe are in their 50s and have a net worth of $1.4 million or so. And I think, wow, man, we're not even close to that. And it's easy to wish we could work with someone like you. The question is, could you help someone who has a negative net worth without a personal investment portfolio, just an employee 401k, and is already 53 years old? It just seems like our situation, though quote unquote normal, may be premature to work with a financial advisor. Kenny, you hit on a very big sore spot with me. And you're correct. It's very difficult for someone who does not have investment assets and a net worth. I mean, I typically work with clients of over $1 million net worth to work with financial advisors that are able to not just sell them and discuss investment products, but to actually give them holistic advice on managing finances and life. It's difficult because no one has figured out how to do that profitably. That's basically why. It's very difficult to scale that and run a profitable business and serve that segment of the market. And the entire industry is struggling with that. That said, here are some thoughts. Number one is you're doing the right thing right now. One is you're intentionally thinking about this stuff and seeking answers. And that is unusual in itself in a lot of ways. So congratulations on that. And number two is you're doing a great thing right now by listening to a podcast like this, meaning that you are seeking information, knowledge, and wisdom to intentionally work on your situation. So keep listening to the show. Listen to other shows that can give you value. I'll do another podcast where I recommend some shows because you can figure this out. You know, one of the hard parts is, and it's just like a business owner when they start, they end up doing a lot of it yourself. You may have to do a lot of the heavy lifting here, and you can't delegate to an advisor like some clients. That doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means that you're going to have to do more of the heavy lifting. And you can have people like me and others speak into your life to help give you frameworks for dealing with particular issues. So make sure that you email me when you do have questions, and I'll guide you best I can within the rules that I'm allowed to play in. Thirdly, know, I don't know if it's third or fourth, but know that I am currently developing tools and resources to help people in your situation. Beyond this podcast, things that you can easily use and that are affordable that can help you make all these little decisions so you can intentionally improve your situation. So Kenny, I appreciate you and I were able to have a conversation after I got your email. We talked and continue to email me, and everyone email me because I'll reply to you and try to guide you as best I can within the rules that I'm required to play by. So Kenny, also based on our conversation, and I'd gotten a couple other emails about this, the next Retirement Plan Live is going to be quote unquote for normal people. It's going to be someone in your situation or similar in their 50s. For whatever reason, their net worth is not 1.4 million. It's more what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And we're going to do a Retirement Plan Live case study for someone in that situation so we can think more creatively of how do we start to build not just a great life, but a great retirement. So stay tuned for that, Kenny. So our second question on net worth comes from Becky, and she has a 3-part question, and each one of these parts has been asked by others. So we should get a lot of A lot of questions answered just with her 3-part question on net worth. So let's go through this one by one. Number one is, and I'm just going to quote her, she says, in completing a net worth statement, how would we account for monthly pensions? My husband currently receives a pension and will receive it for the rest of his life. Should we consider that a paycheck? I've read that you should put that use an amount on your net worth statements. I don't know how to do that. We're both 62. So Becky, when you're dealing with a pension, I generally do not put that on the net worth statement. Now, there is a school of thought where some people do. They calculate a net present value and put that on the net worth statement. I know advisors that put a present value for Social Security on the net worth statement. I personally do not, unless it has a lump sum option. And typically that's before you decide to take the pension. So if you have a lump sum option, meaning that you could take the monthly benefit or you could just take a lump sum of cash to move to an IRA, then what I would do is I would put that lump sum, however it's calculated, on the net worth statement until that option went away. And the reason I do that is because I use the net worth statement as a framework for making decisions on the allocation of wealth, of the allocation of the wealth that you have. So if you have a lump sum option, that means that has options that you have to make a decision about at some point. Once that option goes away, you start receiving your pension, and that lump sum option is no longer there, then I account for it like I account for Social Security income, which is just income in sources. So I have a separate worksheet that I use, which is just called income resources. And that's where I would put a pension amount that you're receiving now, or a future pension amount that you don't have a lump sum option to take. I just feel more comfortable doing that so I can look at productive assets on the net worth statement, because you really don't have any options. All you're going to get is the payment. You're not going to really be able to make any decisions around that. So that's how I account for a pension within organizing your financial resources. Becky's part 2 of her 3-part question regarding net worth is around a mortgage. So rather than owe a mortgage for a house that they own, what they have is they had a house. She says, we owned a house and we owner financed it and sold it to our son. So they are in their second year of payment. It's a $150,000 balance on the mortgage. It's a 30-year mortgage and it pays 4.5%. And she wants to know, well, what do I do with that on the net worth statement? So basically, you are the owner of a bond, which is what a mortgage is, right? They owe you $150,000 and they're going to make monthly payments that have principal and interest over the life of that bond or that mortgage. So when you're calculating your net worth, you would put the outstanding principal of that mortgage as a taxable asset on your balance sheet. So currently you mentioned $150,000. If that's the current outstanding balance on today's net worth statement, you would say you have a private mortgage loan, say who it's to, for $150,000. And then next year it would be $150,000 less whatever principal was paid back to you. So that's how you would account for that on your mortgage. Now, on a separate thought there, Becky, I hope that you did this in a formal way, meaning that they legally bought the house, the deed, and there's a lien against the house, which is your mortgage, and you have a mortgage agreement with an amortization schedule on the loan. So it's all done legally. That is important, obviously, from a protection standpoint, but also from a tax standpoint. So make sure you've done that. Now, her third part of her 3-part question on net worth is really a third part with 2 parts. So Becky, you get a little complicated here. Everyone seems to advise moving old 401ks from previous employers to IRAs. I was talking with a online investment firm, but we just don't know how to decide what specific funds to put it in. And do we trust them to put them in the right place? I used their online calculator, which made a recommendation, but wondered if they just chose funds that were building for new client money, or this is actually the best place for me. I do not anticipate drawing these funds until I'm 70 and a half. So let's deal with the first part, which is, do you roll over an old 401k to an IRA, which is a very common recommendation in the industry. So I can't answer that specifically for you, Becky, because there are so many different options or considerations for you and anyone to make that decision. It's not a clear-cut answer, and it's not always yes, right? So how would you decide that? Here's some things that I would suggest that you consider. Number one is simplicity. How important is simplicity to you? Now, if you look at myself or my wife, if you add up the number of old 401ks we have, it would probably be 5 or 6 over our working career. If we had left each one of those at the old employer firm, then we would have some big and some small 401ks all over the place. We'd each have, 3 or 4 different old 401k plans we'd have to log into and manage. That can be a pain over time. Having these different accounts in different places, having different logins, having different investment options, it can just make it difficult to manage when you're trying to allocate your portfolios efficiently, because you're going to have to do due diligence on different investments. You're going to have to rebalance each account individually. It could be a pain. Some of it has to do how simple do you want to make things for you and your husband to manage. And I think there's value to simplicity, but you don't want to just do simplicity for simplicity's sake. So outside of simplicity, what are some other considerations? Well, another one is going to be fees. Each 401k is somewhat unique in that some will have high administrative fees and high investment management fees. Some will have very low of both of those and be very efficient from a fee standpoint. So you'll want to know, if simplicity isn't the issue, okay, are they efficient from a fee perspective? Is it reasonable relative to what my other options are? And you'll have to decide that based on what you're looking at. And then thirdly, what are my investment options? And just like fees, there are some that have a very robust selection of very well-managed, low-cost investment options. And there are others that are the exact opposite, that they're horrible investment performance, not very many selections. And that's going to be something you're going to need to consider. If you think you might want to leave it there, are they robust enough in their investment selection and efficient enough to make it worthwhile? Another reason why you might not move it out of a 401k to an IRA is that 401ks generally have more protection from a legal standpoint for a liability. If you get sued and bad things happen or you file bankruptcy, generally 401ks are more protected than IRAs. That said, IRAs still have a good amount of protection depending on what state that you live in. And then lastly, realize you have other options. You have this old 401k. You could move that to your new 401k and just keep consolidating them as you move from employer to employer. Most plans will allow that, but not all. It doesn't necessarily just have to go to an IRA. So the key there, Becky, is just what is most efficient from a cost, a simplicity, and a flexibility standpoint. Now I want to get to the second part of your question, which is putting the funds, quote unquote, in the right place. Because you say you tend to be do-it-yourself investors, and I'm reading your words now, but don't want to screw it up here at the end of our careers. We're 3 years out from our retirement date. And that's a really important question, and that's a very important consideration to think of, because you're right in that hot zone. You're 3 years out. You're not going to be saving that much longer. So the opportunities for having a big, and as you say, screw up, and the impact of that screw up for your retirement could be pretty big. So I think getting the funds in the right place is important in terms of an investment standpoint. So when you're in the situation you're in, Becky, I want you to step back and think about this for a second. For decades, you and your husband have been accumulating assets. You've been building wealth for 20, 30, 40 years. That means you're saving, you're investing. When markets go down, you're still saving. So you just buy more shares and they have time to accumulate. And one of the biggest adjustments I see people have to deal with when they're transitioning into retirement is that they're so used to wealth accumulation and wealth maximization that they don't realize that they are switching strategies to life maximization. You've worked so hard to build whatever wealth it is that you've built up over time. When you hit retirement, it's now a whole different ballgame because it's not about wealth maximization. It's how do we take this wealth and actually get it to start working for us? That is what we typically do in retirement. This wealth is going to help maintain our standard of living over time, help us not run out of money, help have money for our heirs, help give us flexibility in retirement, help protect us when life hits us in different ways over the next 30 years in retirement. We demand a lot of our wealth to work for us. And unfortunately, what happens is almost all financial advisors and definitely online calculators, they don't calculate where is the quote unquote right place from an investment standpoint based on life maximization. And we've talked about this before in other episodes, is asset allocation generally is going to ask you questions. How old are you? When do you think you're going to need the money? What's your risk tolerance? What's your investment time frame? And then they'll spit out a pie chart that fits that risk tolerance to maximize potential returns for that given level of risk, which makes great sense when you're accumulating wealth. But what might be the right place given your ages may not be the right place given what you want out of life. Many times I find people are way too aggressive for what they need to achieve the lifestyle that they want, meaning that they're more comfortable being more aggressive than they need to be to actually achieve their goal, which can be great because that could give them more options later on. But it also means that they are more susceptible to big market downturns, which could jeopardize maintaining that standard of living. So this may be a time, Becky, that you and your husband decide whether you want to use a financial advisor or not, a good financial planner to help walk this journey with you. It's going to cost more money if you're a do-it-yourself, but you'll have more confidence that you are putting the money in the right place given what you're trying to get out of life. The difficult part there is if you decide you want to use an advisor, you're going to have to find an advisor, I think, that is focused on you and your goals and not on standard investment management that's focused on risk tolerance. And those are harder to find than you think. So Becky, hopefully that helps you build your net worth statement and gives you a little bit different perspective on deciding what you should do with that old 401k. So now on to our last question, which was from Terry. And Terry was kind enough to leave an audio message on the You Ask, I Answer segment of the RogerWhitney.com website. So let's listen to Terry.
Hi, Mr. Whitney. My question is, one of the things that I'm dealing with, and my wife and I are very fortunate and in a pretty good situation for retirement, is most of our monies are in qualified plans. And I'm currently 59 this year, and we'll be retiring, shooting for 62. We could retire now, but I'm going to continue on to 62. My wife is 56 and is not working and may go back to work, we hope. The question is kind of unwinding, converting qualified IRAs, traditional IRAs, to converting to Roths. And right now, I don't think is a good time because of my income. I probably make over $200,000. But once I retire, I've got 8 years till I hit 70 to then, 8 years to start converting over and stay in a lower tax bracket. What I'm looking for is like a calculator, a flow sheet to stay under, stay in that 15% tax bracket as much as I can, and just looking for some guidance there.
Well, that's a great question, Terry. And you're suffering from what a lot of us suffer from, in that we've been deferring taxes for years and 401ks and IRAs, that as we reach retirement, we have all this money in pre-tax dollars and we realize, hey, pretty soon the government's going to start making me take this money out with retirement minimum distributions, where I'm not going to have any choice and I'll start to get a lot of taxable income. So you're smart to think about how to use that 8 years between age 62 and 70 to convert some of that and pay taxes maybe at a lower rate by converting either some of that to a Roth, which is what you mentioned, or actually drawing from it during that period of time. So if you don't anticipate needing the money for a very long period of time to supplement your retirement lifestyle, then converting it to a Roth could potentially be a great option. Now, you ask about a spreadsheet or a worksheet that can help plan out those 8 years. I don't have that for you, Terry, but let me tell you how I would approach it, and how I do approach it with my clients. Is what I would suggest that you do is each year, towards the beginning of the year, you sit down with your advisor if you use one. And if not, definitely with a CPA. This is an area you want to have professional advice from a tax perspective. And you calculate what you think that conversion amount could be for moving monies to a Roth IRA that will keep you, if not under the 15% bracket, at least not too far into the next bracket. I don't think you need to necessarily limit there. Calculate what you think that number is going to be for the year and do this early in the year. Do your conversion based on that number. And then towards the end of the year or early after the next year starts, meet with your CPA, look at your 1099s and whatever taxable income you have, and see if there are any little adjustments that need to be made, because you have up until your tax deadline to do a recharacterization of all or part of that Roth conversion. So you have a little time at the end of the year to unwind some of that conversion in the event you overestimated how much you thought you could do. And then I would just do that on a year-by-year basis in tandem with your CPA or whatever advisor you use for tax advice. Well, that's it for net worth questions this week. Next week, we will be answering more of your questions, along with some observations that you guys share from the live webinar tonight on whether Kim and Joe can retire.
On your marks, get set.
Welcome to the Smart Sprint segment, where we are getting ready to conclude creating this ICE plan, this in case of emergency plan. Over the last number of weeks, we've been walking through things step by step. And what I promised in the 6-Shot Saturdays, I would share how I keep mine. So I started out keeping mine on spreadsheets, password protected, and create them as PDFs and put them into secure locations. What I have slowly been converting to is using my password manager of choice, 1Password, to put all of this data into. Interesting thing about these password managers, whether it's 1Password or LastPass, which are the two probably most popular, is that not only will they keep their usernames and passwords, but you can put secure notes within those. So what I have been doing is slowly migrating everything into 1Password and then documenting that password for the entire app and putting that in a secure location and then communicating out to those that I love where that is. Now, we've gotten communications about how secure that is. So I think I'd mentioned this before, but in the coming weeks, we're going to have the developer of 1Password on to talk about security issues. And I'm going to share some insights I've gotten recently from a conference that I was speaking at, where a panel right after mine was FBI experts and senior level executives of cybersecurity at major financial firms, where I got to talk to them directly and ask them about these password managers. So I want to share some of the comments they had. So your activity for the next 7 days is to, in whatever form you've put it into, start to communicate to those that need to have the access to this information, where it is and how to access it. That way, your in case of emergency plan can really start to take formation. Hey, welcome to the Happy Lab. This is Roger Whitney, and this is where we noodle on how to be a little bit happier in life. So a week or so ago was President's Day. That's like one of those holidays that you sort of forget is a holiday. And I didn't block it off on my calendar that Monday. So what happened was I ended up having like 6 meetings that day. And I'm talking to my wife on Saturday, right before President's Day. And she's telling me, hey, honey, do you realize I have President's Day off? And I'm like, do you? And I was like, I think I do too. But then I looked at my calendar and I saw all these meetings scheduled because I had forgot to block it on my calendar. So I had an issue. My wife has this off. She would be totally cool if I did all my meetings. They were all video meetings, so I could have done it from the house, and she would have worked on, she loves to redo furniture and things like that. She would have been totally fine, but I just said, you know what? No. So I worked with my rock star assistant, Nicole, and we rescheduled all of the meetings for that Monday. I think there's on like a Saturday. So thank you, Nicole, for doing that. That day, President's Day, she and I went out to lunch in the Bishop's Art District, which is sort of this eclectic little district in Dallas with some cool art shops and cool restaurants. And we just had lunch and we walked around the shops a little bit. And I think even more valuable than the time together was her knowing that I rearranged my entire schedule and chose her over work. And I think that's something that we all need to think about. What is it that we value most? People realize they value you and your time, and they value knowing that you value them over a lot of the other options we have in our life. So that'll make you happy. Hey, I want to thank you for joining me on the show today. Until next week, this is Roger Whitney, the Retirement Answer Man.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.